Here we go. Christopher Nolan's Joker, Heath Ledger's version from The Dark Knight in 2008, is a special kind of villain. He's not a supervillain with powers. He's not a mob boss chasing money or territory. He's something stranger, an idea wearing a face. What he wants is to prove a point about how civilization actually works underneath all the polite stories that we tell ourselves. That's what makes him the most memorable movie villain of the last 25 years. And it's what makes him useful for understanding institutions whose stated purpose and actual machinery don't line up. It's not a perfect one-to-one comparison, and the places where it breaks down are just as interesting as the places where it holds. But once you start tracing the parallels, certain things about the Watchtower's governing body that used to look like religious quirks start to look like something else: recognizable villain storytelling. Let's walk through 13 ways the comparison holds, and then 4 ways that I at first thought it didn't until I started looking more closely and realizing that they actually make the parallels even worse.
You know what I am? I'm a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do with one if I caught it.
The Joker keeps insisting he's just a dog chasing cars. No plan, no goals, pure chaos. But watch the movie carefully, and every single move is set up way in advance. He plants the bombs in the hospital before he gets arrested. He sets up the ferry choice before anyone knows it's coming. He's already put a cell phone bomb in his own henchman before the police book him. The chaos is theater. The improvisation is fully rehearsed. The governing body's new light doctrine works exactly the same way. The official story is that doctrine changes just appear spontaneously through prayerful study. Jehovah is supposedly giving them advancing light. Their pose is one of receiving and being surprised. We didn't see this coming either, brothers. But look at when these changes actually happen. They line up with outside pressure with frightening precision. Blood fractions get reframed when lawsuits start mounting. Generation theology gets reworked when the witnesses who lived through 1914 keep dying off. The two-witness rule gets a small tweak right when the Australian Royal Commission starts asking questions. The clearest recent example: on March 15, 2024, Mark Sanderson, a governing body member, announced a series of changes to disfellowshipping and shunning practices. That was 11 days after the Oslo District Court ruled against Jehovah's Witnesses on March 4, 2024. A ruling that hinged specifically on shunning and put $1.5 million in annual state funding and the legal authority to perform marriages on the line. That's not Jehovah's Spirit moving you. That's reactive policy with the receipts filed off. Both the Joker and the governing body run on the same trick: make scripted moves look unscripted.
Tonight you're all going to be a part of a social experiment.
The Joker's signature move is the manufactured moral test. The two fairies, that's the big one. The hostages dressed as criminals, that's another. The lawyer who knows Batman's identity. He doesn't fight people directly. He builds traps that force them to violate their own values just to escape. The Watchtower system is built out of these same traps. The blood doctrine's the cleanest example. A parent has to choose between their child's life and the institution's loyalty test. Disfellowshipping forces members to choose between a sibling, a child, or a parent, and the institution itself, which it masquerades as being your relationship with God. Higher education forces a young person to choose between intellectual development and approved status. Reporting child sexual abuse forces an elder to choose between the law of the land, doing what's right, and the two-witness rule, which is the institution's authority. In every case, the structure is the same as the fairy scene. Here are 2 boats. Here are 2 detonators. You have a deadline. Choose. The institution doesn't have to harm anyone directly. It just sets up the geometry of the trap. What makes both versions so effective is that the choice is presented as a test of your character, not a flaw of the system itself. The Joker tells the fairies it's their decision. The governing body tells parents it's their faith being tested. The architect of the trap stays invisible inside the trap.
Well, you look nervous. Is it the scars? You want to know how I got them?
One of the Joker's most imitated bits is the question he asks before each origin story. How did he get those scars? 3 different stories in the film. Each one's delivered with total conviction. Each one contradicts the others. None of them can be verified. The point isn't that one of them is true. The point is that the Joker isn't tied down by his own history. He becomes whatever the moment requires. The Watchtower has rewritten its own origin story over and over again. Russell's role has been gradually written out. He's no longer treated as a Bible student luminary so much as some early figure who got a few things right and a lot of things wrong. The 1919 selection by Christ date wasn't claimed in 1919 itself. It actually got added decades later. The chronology charts have been redrawn. The failed predictions of 1914, 1925, 1975, they've all been blamed on overzealous individual brothers, misapplied expectations, members not paying close enough attention to careful wording, anything but the institution itself. This isn't quite lying. It's a particular relationship to history. The past isn't what happened. The past is whatever serves the current moment. Russell becomes useful or inconvenient depending on what the rhetoric needs that day. The 1919 date carries weight or it doesn't depending on context. Just like the Joker scars, the institutional past is a story with multiple authorized versions. The Joker has no fingerprints, no dental records, no DNA on file. He's surrendered his individual self for whatever he has become. When Batman demands his name, there is no name to give. The Watchtower asks something with the same shape underneath. New members are encouraged to die to their old self, shed previous identity, shed previous friendships, shed previous holidays, loyalties, birthdays gone, Christmas gone, family gone if family doesn't comply or if they give you too much grief for joining the religion. Career gone if career conflicts with the field service. Cultural background, hobbies, romantic attachments outside the truth, which is what they call it, all of that is subject to dissolution. What remains is a Jehovah's Witness, and only a Jehovah's Witness. The institution's logic and the Joker's existential logic look different on the surface, but underneath they're the same shape. The only way to be inside this thing is to stop being who you really were. The reward is purpose. The cost is the entire previous biography.
Where's the alarm guy?
Boss told me when the guy was done, I should take him out. One less share, right?
Funny, he told me something similar.
No.
The Joker's bank job henchmen kill each other one by one because he tells each of them that whoever finishes the others gets a bigger cut. None of them get a cut, of course. The henchmen exist to be used and then thrown away by the Joker. This one is harder to draw cleanly with the governing body because rank-and-file witnesses obviously aren't being murdered. But the structural relationship is the same. Total loyalty is extracted. Total disposability when it's convenient. Elders will run judicial committees that destroy families and then themselves get removed when they become inconvenient. Bethelites give decades of their lives at minimal stipends and are sent home in their 50s when their health fails. Pioneers give up careers, retirement savings, and education on the understanding that Armageddon is just around the corner. And then they quietly age into poverty as the dates keep moving. The two-witness rule has even been used to position elders as legal liability shields. I just talked about that in a recent video. The institution sets the policy that suppresses abuse reports. Then, when this suppression generates lawsuits, the elders who follow the policy get framed as the ones who exercise their own judgment. The henchmen take the fall.
I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve.
The Joker's worldview, if you can call it a worldview, runs on a single claim. Civilization is a thin coat of agreed upon hypocrisies, and he's the only person honest enough to see through it. His chaos isn't random, it's revelation. He's not a monster, not by his own framing anyway, he's just ahead of the curve. The governing body operates on a claim with the same shape. Whatever the policy, whatever the reversal, whatever the historical embarrassment, the move is justified by referring to a higher logic the rank and file aren't equipped to evaluate. We don't know why Jehovah is allowing this. We don't need to know. The governing body sees what nobody else sees. Past errors weren't errors, they were stages. Christendom is blind, we're not. Apostates are deluded, we have clear-sighted vision. Both of these positions are designed so they can't be proven wrong. There's no piece of evidence that could land because every counter-argument's already been pre-categorized as a symptom of the listener's limited perspective.
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
The Joker can't be argued with because he holds the meta position. The governing body can't be argued with because they hold the meta position. Neither one needs better evidence. They have the higher vantage point. They know more than you. They're better than you. Alfred's diagnosis of the Joker is famous. Some men aren't looking for anything logical. They want to watch the world burn. But the more interesting moment comes elsewhere. The Joker explicitly tells Batman that he completes him.
I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you?
Without Batman to define himself against, the Joker's just a guy in makeup. Having an enemy isn't optional for him. It's part of who he is. The Watchtower is the same. They need Satan's world. They need Christendom. They need apostates. They need persecution narratives, end times urgency, opposition, and mockery. Strip all that out, and the institutional identity just collapses. There's almost no Watchtower content that isn't defined by what it's standing against, whether that's the Catholic Church or false religion or the United Nations, higher education, worldly association, former members, whatever. This is why the institution can never quite let opposition go, even when it would benefit them publicly to let it go. The opposition isn't a problem to be solved. It's the architecture that holds the building up. Get rid of it and the whole thing falls apart. You can't feel special. You can't feel righteous unless the unwashed, unrighteous, satanic masses are out to get you. If you get rid of them, you're just a nut job sitting in a room with a bunch of other nut jobs. The Joker doesn't commit crimes. He stages them. The bank robbery is choreographed. He doesn't keep the money. The pencil trick is timed to land so everybody else in the room will listen to him. The hospital implosion is filmed for distribution. It's the Joker's grammar. Power has to be witnessed for it to be real. Private violence isn't enough. There's gotta be an audience. Well, the Watchtower runs on the same logic. Annual conventions, regional conventions, international conventions. They're not necessary at all. You could stream that stuff and watch it from home or just put it in print. Most of the content could be written down, it could be delivered through video, whatever. It'd be way more efficient. But the spectacle is the point. Stadium-scale gatherings, coordinated dress, multilingual simultaneous broadcasts, JW broadcasting, tour videos of the Warwick Complex, the New World Studio productions, the dramatized Bible accounts, all of it. The medium isn't a side dish to the message. The medium is the message. Look at me.
Hey, look at me.
Look at us. Look at the scale of us. Look at how the world can't do what we do. Look how many languages we've produced literature in. It's the same impulse as the Joker filming his hostages. Power is being performed for an audience. The most disturbing arc in The Dark Knight isn't the Joker's violence. It's what he does to Harvey Dent. Dent is the institutional hope, the prosecutor who could clean up Gotham legitimately, the White Knight, the proof that the system can work without vigilantes. The Joker doesn't kill him. The Joker breaks him into Two-Face and turns him into proof that the best of us is no better than the worst. The Watchtower has a long catalog of broken White Knights. Ray Franz is the most famous one, a governing body member, nephew of Fred Franz, deeply committed, then disfellowshipped and shunned to his death after he started asking honest questions. There are others that are less famous, Bethelites who served decades and were quietly destroyed when they raised concerns, circuit overseers who burned out into addiction, elders who covered for abusers because they were told to and then were left holding the legal bag. The institutional logic, like the Joker's, prefers to take the most committed members and either consume them or weaponize them. The damage from a quiet doubter is small. The damage from a devoted believer who breaks publicly is enormous. And structurally, the institutions needed those breakings. They showed the remaining members what happens to anybody who steps out of line. You don't want to end up like Ray, do you? You don't want to end up like that Bethelite, do you? You don't want to lose everything you know and everyone you love and be cast out into Satan's world, do you? Alfred's other diagnosis is the line the whole movie hangs on. Some men cannot be bought, bullied, reasoned with, or negotiated with. The Joker is immune to the levers ordinary people pull on each other. The governing body sits in the same untouchable position. They can't be reasoned with because they're not personally accountable to any reasoning process. They rotate, they die and get replaced, they make collective decisions that no individual member can be pinned to. They claim divine direction, which shuts down argument before it even starts. They operate behind a corporate veil that absorbs the legal exposure. Members who try to reach them through letters get form responses or silence. Journalists who try to interview them get nothing. Ex-members who write open critiques are by definition apostates and therefore by definition are not to be engaged with or listened to. The result is a structural condition that maps directly onto the Joker's. There's no proposition you can put to this entity that's going to move it because the entity has been engineered to be unreachable. The Joker has a very specific self-presentation move. He tells you what he isn't. He's not a monster. He's not a schemer. He's not crazy. The denial gets delivered with such casual confidence that the listener is supposed to update their judgment downward without ever examining whether the denial actually addresses the evidence. The official JW.org frequently asked questions page titled, "Are Jehovah's Witnesses a Cult?" does the same thing. The argument has a precise two-step structure. First, it names two common ideas of a cult, a newer unorthodox religion and a dangerous religious sect with a human leader. Then it argues that Jehovah's Witnesses don't fit either of those. The criteria are carefully chosen. Coercive control over personal life decisions, mandated shunning of family members, suppression of outside information, demand for unquestioning obedience to a small authority body, those don't make the list, even though that's what cult experts who've actually labeled the Witnesses a cult, Singer, Hassan, Lalich, the Lifton influence researchers, the Bite model framework, all of them they're not responding to a new religion or a human leader. They're responding to the operational mechanics. But JW.org argues against something that they didn't argue for. It's a straw man. It's a logical fallacy. The Joker's "I'm not a monster" works the same way. The line doesn't engage the evidence. It pre-categorizes it. The listener's likely judgment gets named in advance and rejected, and a self-flattering counter-category gets substituted in its place. The accusation gets processed before it can land. JW.org does that too. It sets up the straw man, what a cult is by some common definition rather than the actual definition, dismisses it as untrue, and states that we're the only true Christians on earth because we do things like the first century. They imply that in that very article, and they say it directly in the rest of their literature over time. But the deeper move in both cases is the same. The very fact that denial has to be made tells you that there's truth there. The local book club doesn't have a frequently asked pages titled, "Are We a Cult?" The Baptist preacher down the road doesn't address cult accusations in the congregation bulletin. The denial itself is the proof. You only have to deny being a cult if there's enough evidence in plain view that people keep raising the question of whether or not you're a cult. The Joker only has to deny being a monster because he is, in fact, doing the things that monsters do.
I'm only burning my half. All you care about is money. This town deserves a better class of criminal.
The Joker is a showman before he's anything else. The pencil trick, the pause for effect, the wide-eyed mock surprise, the sudden shifts from quiet menace to manic laughter. Those aren't accidents. They're a deliberate style that marks every utterance as event rather than information. The performance is the medium. Stephen Lett's broadcasting style operates in the same way. Now, let me be clear, I'm not saying Stephen Lett is trying to look like the Joker, even if he accidentally does. The exaggerated facial expressions, the strategic pauses, the insane eyebrow work, the abrupt shifts in tone, these aren't the affect of a man delivering theological information. They're the affect of a man performing significance. His broadcasts get clipped, screenshotted, and shared in EXJW spaces precisely because the theatricality is so over the top that individual frames work as standalone images. There's even a YouTube video literally titled, "Why is Stephen Lett's face like that?" That title is the cultural footprint of the Register. Now, you might ask, what does this style accomplish institutionally? Well, the same thing Joker's style does. It draws attention. It marks the content as important, even if odd, separating it from natural, neutral discussion and elevating it into the realm of revelation. It bypasses critical thinking by activating an emotional channel before a rational one. It signals authority through performance rather than through argument, and it makes the content more memorable, sticky, and quotable inside the in-group. Now, that's a very important caveat. That only works on people who are inside, who have been conditioned to see that as being revelatory rather than just insane. From the outside, he looks insane, just like the Joker from the outside looks insane. But to his inner circle, he holds the cards, he makes the moves, he seems to know what he's doing, and he pulls it off. Well, in my opinion, that's exactly what's going on with Stephen Lett and the governing body. He is the painted face of the group.
Another way we can contribute to the oneness, rejecting false stories that are designed to separate us from Jehovah's organization. As an example, think about the apostate-driven lies and dishonesties that Jehovah's organization is permissive toward pedophiles.
Lett's most circulated clips track this register at peak intensity. The February 2015 morning worship broadcast, for instance, where he characterized critical reporting on the organization's child abuse record as apostate-driven lies and dishonesties, that's just one example. The wide eyes, the held pause, the implied menace toward a category of people that the audience is being trained to distrust. The 2014 broadcast, where he claimed there's more evidence for the invisible 1914 kingdom than for gravity, electricity, and wind. That's another one. The rhyme with the Joker's interrogation scenes is direct, the same bug-eyed intensity used to communicate that the speaker is operating outside ordinary earthly rules. The one difference is that the Joker's theatricality is offered as honest theatricality. He's openly performing. I mean, he wears face paint for a reason. Lett's theatricality is offered inside a frame of sober paternal instruction. That makes it more effective on the in-group and more disturbing to the outside observer. Same tools, opposite framing. The Joker's most chilling rhetorical move isn't his violence, though. It's the way he flips authorship of the violence onto the audience. The henchmen kill each other because they wanted the bigger cut. The fairies get tested because they're the ones holding the detonators. In his telling, the citizens of Gotham secretly wanted him to expose civilization's hypocrisy. They wanted him to be the answer. The 1975 episode is the cleanest institutional version of this move in Watchtower history. Through the late 1960s and early 70s, Watchtower publications repeatedly drew attention to 1975 as the end of 6,000 years of human history. The 1966 book, Life Everlasting and Freedom of the Sons of God, set the table. Its chronology, starting around page 29, ran the math out to 1975 and asked how appropriate it would be for the millennium to begin then. Convention talks pressed the date hard. The August 15, 1968 Watchtower ran an article literally titled, "Why Are You Looking Forward to 1975?" The Kingdom Ministry in March of 1968 noted that there were only 90 months left. Members were urged to skip career planning, skip retirement savings, skip having children. Pioneers were celebrated in our Kingdom Ministry of 74 for selling their homes and property to finish out the remaining time in full-time ministry. Then 1975 passed. Then 1976. The first official walkback came on July 15, 1976 in the Watchtower magazine. And this is where the cleanest blame flip lives. The article framed the disappointment as belonging to anyone whose hopes had been based on wrong premises, locating the error in the member's understanding rather than in the publication's claims. His own understanding was at fault. His own premises were wrong. The institution's role goes unmentioned. A fuller acknowledgement came 4 years later in the March 15, 1980 Watchtower. And it's very telling that they still had to bring this back up 4 years later. It shows that first article didn't work. There were people who saw through the nonsense of Watchtower's claims. Yes, they were, in fact, strongly implying the end was coming, and everybody knew it, so they had to talk about it again 4 years later. That article is actually more honest than the 1976 piece. It explicitly stated that the 1966 book aroused considerable expectation regarding 1975, that subsequent statements implied probability rather than mere possibility, and that those statements contributed to the buildup of the expectation already initiated. It even extended the disappointed ones to include persons having to do with the publication of the information. That's a partial institutional confession, 5 years too late, but real. But notice what it doesn't do. There's no apology, no naming of the specific publications, no accountability for the people who acted on the expectation in good faith. And critically, the same Watchtower issuing that partial admission was already, by 1980, treating those who had fallen away after 1975 as cautionary examples of insufficient spiritual maturity. The February 15, 76 Watchtower had already framed disappointment-driven departures as a rejection of divine rulership. The institution that stoked the date now positioned itself as the steady center against which faltering members were being measured. The architect of the trap presented itself as the rescuer from the trap, but they built the trap. This is where the Joker rhyme really hits. Not because the Watchtower disclaimed all responsibility. Eventually, it didn't entirely do that. But because the working message throughout the whole cycle was this: we set the table, you got too excited at the table, your loss is your spiritual problem, and the proof of your spiritual problem is that you're now upset. The 1980 article cooled this off a little bit into a more measured posture, but they never fully got rid of it. The years before and immediately after 1975, that was the high heat. This pattern keeps recurring in lower stakes form throughout the Watchtower record. The unfulfilled Great Tribulation being imminent rhetoric of the 1980s and 90s, the careful walking back of the generation theology, the post-2014 quiet on this generation will not pass away. Every time, the institution stokes the expectation in the foreground while leaving itself an exit clause in the fine print. When the expectation fails, the fine print becomes the whole text, and members who clung to the foreground claim are made to feel foolish for having listened to the Watchtower in the first place. But don't you dare leave now. This is structurally the cleanest single instance of Joker logic in the institutional record. You wanted me to be the answer. It's not my fault you believed me. There are 4 important differences between the Joker and the governing body. None of them are fatal to the comparison. At first, I thought they would be, but eventually, I realized each one actually sharpens what's distinctive about the institutional version of this thing. Number 1, the Joker's one person. The governing body's a committee. Now, this isn't a small detail. The committee structure scatters responsibility in a way the Joker's solo act can't. No governing body member personally signs the policy that destroys a family. Authorship is collective, anonymous, and indefinite. The Joker is responsible for his pencil. No governing body member is responsible for shunning, not directly. The institution has accomplished what the Joker had to do alone, only with no one to point at. Number 2, the Joker is honest about his nihilism. The governing body isn't. The Joker tells you what he is. The governing body presents the opposite face: paternal love, shepherd care, the brothers who weep over your discipline because they love you so much. The veneer is essential. The Joker without the makeup wouldn't work. The governing body without the veneer wouldn't either, but for the opposite reason. The Joker's mask reveals who he is. The governing body's mask hides who they are. Number 3, the Joker rules by naked fear. The governing body rules by fear laundered as love. This is the one place the parallel actually deepens under examination. The Joker's coercion is undisguised. Do this or die. His henchmen don't love him. They comply because they're afraid of him, and they know they're afraid. The Watchtower runs on the same kind of fear architecture. Fear of Armageddon, fear of shunning, fear of losing every relationship that's ever mattered, fear of demonic influence, fear of divine disapproval, falling away from God's love. But the fear's been laundered through devotional vocabulary. The compliant member experiences that fear as their faith. The threat of family loss gets reframed as Jehovah's protective standard. The threat of Armageddon gets reframed as a hope to be welcomed because it'll cleanse the world. The threat of shunning gets reframed as the loving discipline of a perfect father. PMOs, people who are physically in but mentally checked out, they feel the fear directly because the love frame has cracked for them. They see through it. PMEs, the physically and mentally in, the ones who still believe, they feel the same fear, but it's pre-processed into language that they call devotion or faith. They are, in many cases, the exact same person on different days. This makes the institution more dangerous than the Joker, not less. The Joker's people at least know they're afraid. The Watchtower's people often can't access their own fear directly because the institution has supplied them with a vocabulary that names their compliance love and names the cost of leaving Jehovah's standards. Leaving the Watchtower, the religion of the institution of Jehovah's Witnesses, is equated with leaving God himself. The fear is actually identical to what holds the Joker's henchmen. Only the self-narration is different. The institution accomplished something the Joker didn't, not the absence of coercion, but the camouflage of that coercion is so complete that the people experiencing the coercion experience their submission as faith. Number 4, the Joker is anti-institutional. The governing body is anti-everything except their own institution. Now, when I first thought about this, I originally framed it as a clean difference. The Joker tears down social structures from the outside, where the governing body is a structure. The Watchtower institution is an institution. But that framing actually collapsed when I started looking into it more deeply and thinking about it. The Watchtower is anti-everything that isn't them. They're anti-Christendom, which they call Babylon the Great. They're anti-government, that's Satan's world. They're anti-education, that's worldly wisdom. They're selectively anti-medicine when it comes to blood and, in the past, certain transplants and things like that. They're definitely anti all other religions because they're all demonic. They're anti-political participation, anti-nationalist symbols, anti-holiday, anti-interfaith. Every institutional structure outside the Watchtower is, in the way the publications talk about them, something to be escaped, separated from, or watched for impending collapse. And the eschatology is literally that the world should burn. Armageddon is the violent destruction of every other institution on earth, every government, church, university, multinational, cultural structure, joyfully anticipated, illustrated for decades in the Watchtower publications with images of buildings collapsing and the wicked running in panic and being killed. Witnesses are taught to look forward to this. The Joker wants Gotham to see what it really is by burning the structures down. The Watchtower teaches its members to see the world for what it really is by anticipating Jehovah God burning the structures down. They are cheering for it. The grammar's the same, only the agent changes. The Joker is the agent of his own arson. Jehovah is the agent of the Watchtower's hopeful arson. The Watchtower gets to want the same outcome while pretending its own hands are clean. What I thought at first was that the Joker is anti-institutional from outside any structure, while the Watchtower is anti-institutional from inside one structure it's carved out as the singular exception. I thought that made the two different. But that doesn't even hold. The Joker has a network. He just uses everyone in the network by manipulating their own greed and self-preservation instincts. But the Watchtower does the same thing. It uses faithful witnesses, extracting every ounce of free labor and willing participation by manipulating them into thinking that doing that will keep God from destroying them at Armageddon and will result in the gift of a paradise earth free of all their current problems. The Joker burns Gotham from a warehouse. The governing body cheers Gotham burning from a corporate campus. The two concepts aren't really that different. What makes this comparison useful isn't the claim that the Watchtower is as bad as the Joker, as that the Joker is a culturally legible character. Certain things happening inside the Watchtower system that are otherwise hard to put a name on suddenly become clear when you map them onto the Joker. The film gives audiences a vocabulary for things like manufactured moral pressure tests, theatrical demonstrations of authority, the requirement of having an antagonist, an enemy, the breaking of the loyal as a demonstration to the rest, identity erasure as the price of admission, the rhetoric of a higher logic, and the impossibility of negotiating with people like that. Audiences see all those in the Joker and immediately recognize them as villainous architecture. Well, the Watchtower runs the same architecture inside a building that looks like a corporate headquarters. The architecture is the same. The presentation is opposite. That's the move. And the more closely you examine what looked at first like clean differences between the two, the Joker being honest about his nihilism, the Joker ruling by raw fear, the Joker being anti-institutional, the Joker being one person rather than a committee, the more those differences turn out to be camouflage rather than actual substantive differences. The governing body doesn't have honest nihilism. It has cosmically framed certainty that produces functionally similar disregard for human life and value. The governing body doesn't rule without fear. It rules by fear so thoroughly laundered through devotional language that members experience their own coercion as devotion in faith. Now that's sick. The governing body isn't pro-institution, it's anti-every institution except itself, with an eschatology that joyfully anticipates the burning of all other institutions. The governing body isn't more accountable than a single person. The committee structure just spreads the blame around so completely that no individual is ever responsible for anything. And the corporate structure does the same thing, separating the governing body so that they never actually sign off on anything legally, which makes it very difficult to get at them through the legal system. The differences that do hold are mostly differences of intensity and visibility. The Joker's an unmistakable villain. The governing body is more polished. The Joker tells you what he is. The governing body tells you the opposite of what they are. Those aren't differences in how the machinery works, though. Those are just differences in the paint job. The skeleton underneath is the same. The most useful villains, in the end, are the ones who look nothing like villains, at least not from the inside. I wanted to pause for a second to ask for your support by becoming a channel member of the channel by clicking the join button below. It starts at a whopping $4 a month. If that won't break the bank for you, it helps me be able to produce more content like this. If it would break the bank for you, by all means, just keep watching. Thank you in advance for your generous support.